The Khan watched the last of the warp energies tear away. He watched the ash settle, and the residual snags of ether burn ripple into nothing. Then he watched 7 figures within the maelstrom emerge. 6 of them were legionaries. They were clad in pale, thick-slabbed Terminator armor and carried huge Reaper scythes. Their pauldrons were olive green, and the links between the plates were cold iron. They were massive, heavier set than Kinzar's retinue, hunched at the shoulder and leaking pale green vapor from the last of the teleportation beams. The 7th occupied a different order of power. He towered over them, clad in plate of bare brass and corpse-white ceramite. A long cloak of dark green hung down from high-rimmed shoulder guards. Skulls dangled from chains about his belt. Some human, some Xenos. A long pistol nestled among them, drum-barreled and studded with bronze kill markers. His eyes were amber, glinting from under the deep shadow of a tattered cowl. An ornate rebreather covered the lower half of his face. Coils of oily gas spilled from the lining of his battleplate, dribbling down the skull-painted surfaces and hissing on contact with Prospero's death-dry soil. Tubes running from the rebreather mask gurgled with fluids. His breath came in clogged wheezes. "Jaghatai," said the Primarch, Mortarion, planting the heel of his enormous scythe into the dust. The Khan looked up at the blade. It was known as Silence, the greatest of the 14th Legion's infamous man-reapers. "Mortarion," the Khan replied, nodding in acknowledgement. "This is not your world." "Nor yours. And yet, here we both are." Mortarion's honor guard, the Death Shroud, spread out silently across the ash. Kinzar's warriors fell into a mirror formation. The 2 forces faced one another, just a few meters apart. Above them, the lightning rippled, and the thunder growled. The Khan felt his muscles tense. "If you came for Magnus, he is no longer here." "I came to find you, brother. Things have changed." "You noticed?" Mortarion smiled behind his mask, making his mottled cheeks crease. "I have plenty to tell you, Jaghatai. There are opportunities here. The cost of error has never been higher. The rewards beyond imagination." The Khan observed him guardedly. Mortarion had always been hard to read. "You are here to persuade me, then?" he asked. "You think, after all this, there are any more arguments to be made?" Mortarion reached up with his left hand and pushed his cowl back. A pallid grey scalp was revealed, though it still bore the noble countenance of the Gene Brotherhood. Deep bags nested under his sharp eyes, and wisps of gas rose up from the collar around his neck. "Listen," he said. "Just listen. You might learn something. Even you, my proud brother, can still be tutored." The Khan left his blade unsheathed, holding it loosely by his side. Mortarion's power seemed to have grown. Something burned in him, dark like old embers. His flesh was somehow bleaker, his stance a little more crabbed, and yet the aura of intimidation around him had been augmented. Back on Ulanor, even at the height of triumph, he had not had quite the same heft. The Khan recalled his brother's words. "Then what would be the wager on us, brother? What would you pay if we fought?" "Say what you came to say," said the Khan. Mortarion bowed, half mockingly. "I have traveled a long way to find you," he rasped. "And now, look around.
We have all the time in the universe. All we have left to disturb us are the dead. And they do not stir.
He smiled again, as mirthless and dry as before.
Yet.
Mortarion took a few steps towards the Khan. Kinzar moved to intervene, but the Khan gave him a wordless battle sign, and he retreated with the others. The two Primarchs stood alone, shadowed by their respective bodyguards. Mortarion was a little broader, the Khan a little taller. Mortarion's armor was heavy, almost crude, where the Khan's was fine wrought. Silence was a gigantic weapon forged from a chunk of adamantium and glittering with archaeotech fixings. The Khan's dao was a slender, perfectly curved piece of flawless metal, deriving its strength from its form rather than its size. It could be made to move faster than any blade in the Imperium. Speed against implacability. An interesting contest.
You were not meant to be here, said Mortarion. You were meant to join the Alpha Legion at Alaxes.
The Khan nodded.
Or return to Terra. We did not wish that. Why would we?
The Alpha Legion held us at Chondax. They wanted us to hear from Dawn. Mortarion raised a hairless eyebrow.
Indeed? You surprise me. But perhaps you shouldn't. It seems that Alpharius is never wholly of one mind.
He chuckled darkly.
He plays a dangerous game. His own intrigues will throttle him.
So why you? Asked the Khan.
Why not me, brother?
I assumed it would be Horus.
Vanity. He has many things to keep him busy.
The Khan's eyes narrowed. Mortarion did not seem too sure of himself. For all the show, all the projected force, he was on shaky ground.
Horus didn't send you, did he? That means nothing.
It means everything, said the Khan, studying his brother's reaction. Magnus told me how the war stands. Some souls are still to be decided on. There are always those of us on the edge. I was one. You were another. Mortarion snorted.
My legion was at Istvan, so put aside any thoughts that we are not committed. The outcome is already determined, and your choice is simple. Preservation or destruction. Come, Jaghatai, you've never even believed in unity. You saw through it even when Gilliman was lecturing us all to tears, back when there was still Xenos standing between our father and the galaxy's edge.
Then tell me the alternative.
A galaxy of warriors,
said Mortarion.
A galaxy of hunters, where the strong are given their freedom. A galaxy in which there is no dead hand at the tiller constraining us, lying to us.
And all this led by Horus. Mortarion shrugged.
He is the start. He is the champion, the sacrificial king. He may burn himself out to get to Terra. He may not. Either way, there will be room for others to rise.
Mortarion drew closer, and the Khan smelled the chemical tang of his armor.
You should never have thrown your lot in with the Angel, brother, let alone Magnus. I hated to see it, the three of you, getting dragged in deeper. I always thought you'd break away, see through it, get tired of the hypocrisy.
They were never hypocrites.
No?
Mortarion exhaled a parched laugh.
I hoped you'd have understood them sooner. It's the warp, Jaghatai. Our father tried to pretend it wasn't there, as if he weren't already up to his elbows in its soul-sucking filth. It should have been cordoned off, put away, forgotten about. It's not for us. It's a sickness. A blight.
Mortarion became agitated. He calmed down slowly, wheezing through his gas-shrouded mask. The Khan heard a faint hiss, and guessed at what kind of suppressants had been shunted into his bloodstream.
I see what has happened,
he said quietly. Mortarion cocked his head.
Oh?
You were always sincere. I will give you that, said the Khan. You never hid what you wanted. I can guess how you thought it would go. First, hobble the sorcerers, silence the witches, drive them out, and rule passes to the uncorrupted, the healthy. That was your great project. You even told me of it that day on Ulanor. I thought back then that they were empty threats, but I should have known. You do not make empty threats. As the Khan spoke, Mortarion's mask-locked expression remained inscrutable. Every so often, his eyes would go filmy, or his finger would twitch. There was a kind of febrile energy about him, spilling out of the cracks just as the noxious fumes did. But it has gone wrong, hasn't it? The Khan went on. You have completed your great mission, but there are more sorcerers than ever. Horus has sponsored them. Lorgar has shown them new tricks. If Magnus has not already made up his mind, then he soon will, and then you will be surrounded. You've destroyed the Librarius, only to find the witches are now untrammeled. They played you well. You have done their work for them, and soon you will be dragged into it yourself, as warp-sick as they are.
You think that...
I see it perfectly. Magnus showed me. Your legion may be free of it for now, but a change will come. You made your pacts, and now they will come to collect.
You fool.
Mortarion stiffened. His eyes blazed with anger for a second, quickly quelled.
You do not.
And that is why you came to find me, said the Khan. You've run out of friends. Who will stand with you against the Ether Weavers now? Angron. What an ally.
Kuz. Good luck.
The Khan gazed at Mortarion disdainfully. You've tasted the fruits of treachery and found them bitter. Don't drag me into your ruin. You're on your own, brother. Mortarion's expression fractured behind the mask, shifting into an enraged snarl, disfiguring rapidly. Silence quivered, and he took half a step forward, his free fist clenching.
I came to give you a choice,
Mortarion said, keeping his voice under control with some difficulty.
Half your legion are already declared for Horus. The others will follow wherever you order them. Our father's time is over. You can be a part of the order that replaces him.
The Khan smiled. A cold smile, imperious in its contempt.
A new emperor.
Mortarion glared back at him, though he could not hide the doubt.
Why not? Why should it not be you?
The Khan nodded, finally understanding.
Or you? Why not indeed?
He drew closer, noticing for the first time the discoloration of the skin around the edge of his brother's rebreather. How long had he worn it? I'll tell you why. Because we were never the Empire Builders. We were the Outriders. You chafed at it. I embraced it. Mortarion began to back away. As he did so, silence crackled into life, sparking with green-tinged energy. The Death Shroud lowered their scythes in a combat posture.
Then you will not be persuaded,
said Mortarion, his filtered voice sunken into a surly growl.
A shame. I invested much energy to save you, brother. I shall take no pleasure in your destruction.
Behind the Khan, the Keshik readied their blades.
"And there is the difference between you and me,"
said the Khan, moving his dhow into guard.
"By the time I make my kills, I am always laughing."
The Khan struck first, moving faster than thought, his cloak swirling around him. Mortarion met the blow with his scythe, and a radial wave shot out from silence, throwing up the ash in swirling clouds. The Death Shroud lumbered into range, swinging their own scythes. Kinzar's warriors engaged them, charging across the cracked stone and bringing their blades to bear. Neon blue claws clashed with heavy iron, sending dull clangs resounding across the empty square. Amidst the ruins of Tizca, the two forces slammed together, moving like choreographed dancers as the eyeless faces of old statues gazed down at them.
"I see your mind, brother,"
hissed the Khan, hammering home the attack.
"You would turn me, or end me."
Mortarion grunted as he blocked the incoming dhow. He moved far more slowly than the Khan, but everything he did was solid, dense, and indomitable.
"If you're stubborn enough not to see the chance here, then yes, your time is over."
The Khan laughed. Wielding his blade again freely felt good. The Cygnoian had been a trivial challenge. Going up against a fellow Primarch was the kind of test he had missed for too long. He darted in close, spinning on one boot before thrusting his sword at Mortarion's midriff. The strike was blocked, but the Deathlord stumbled.
"So slow,"
taunted the Khan. His blade danced, flashing like the lightning above. Every strike was weighted heavily, slicing chunks from Mortarion's thick plate as if it were corroded scrap.
"You got everything wrong. Why exchange one master for another? And do not take me for a fool. Only one soul may rule from the throne world."
He heard the clash of blades around him, the soft rush of bolter discharge, and the heavy bang of the shells detonating. More cracks opened up underfoot, glowing red like molten steel. Muzzle flashes lit up ruined, carven images on ancient stonework, starkly revealing the Prospero occult devices engraved upon every facet. Mortarion rallied, breathing hard. Though his reflexes were slow, his strength was impressive. He had already taken blows that would have felled a lesser warrior, and yet seemed barely troubled.
"Your legion called out,"
he snarled, wielding silence in deadening sweeps.
"You have cells operating in every brotherhood, desperate to serve. All we did was answer them."
The Khan laughed again. He felt alive, unfettered, free for the first time in months to act.
"The lodges, eh? Secret societies. You think that'll be enough to drag us behind the War Master?"
Mortarion dug in, and his heavy boots sank into the ash. The Khan launched a series of blistering dhow blows, glancing off the Death Lord's thick pauldrons and sending him reeling.
"I let them meet,"
the Khan said. His blade was moving brutally, smearing with speed and clanging from the scythe.
"I have always let them. I am not a tyrant, brother."
Mortarion started to rally, meeting the Khan's fury with resolute efficiency. He took a stride back in close, planting his feet widely to close down another incoming stroke. The two weapons twisted and rebounded, sending sparks flying through the gloom. The intensity of it was vicious. Every perfect movement was vindication of the Emperor's gene majesty, albeit exemplified in two totally different aspects. The troops battling around them, themselves titans of combat, were reduced to irrelevance, like mortal warriors straying into the quarrels of gods.
"We are all tyrants,"
Mortarion rasped, picking up the pace of his scythe blows.
"Do not fool yourself. We were bred for nothing else."
"Not I," said the Khan, whirling around him, moving with an almost unconscious balance.
"I care nothing for dominion. Never have. You, on the other hand, you yearn for it."
The Khan drove Mortarion back further, pounding and pummeling him across the square's margins and towards the edge of the broken pyramid. They reeled together under the shadow of Photep's arch, the old entrance to the immense vaults within, now roofless and gaping. The Khan felt brief flashes of warp fire and guessed that it was Arvida. He heard Kinzar's battle cry and gloried in it. The Keshik master was a superlative warrior, and he had no fear for him, nor any of the others. They could fight now. They knew the enemy. They could see him, and that was enough.
I deserve it,
Mortarion wheezed, gasping into his rebreather as he labored under the assault.
I always deserved it. You could have joined me.
The Khan did not relent. His blade was like a shard of starlight, fierce and irresistible. Your time will come. You tell me the warps should be forgotten, shut away. How little you know. It will come for you now. Killing you here will be a mercy. I can already see your future darkening, dragging at your very soul. The two of them thundered across the base level of the pyramid, followed at every step by the echoing clash of arms around them. The edifice's open carcass rose up high above, its broken spars jutting upwards in perfect geometry towards a non-existent apex. The old internal walls, half slumped into rubble and riddled with yawning gaps, twisted away from them in a labyrinth of complexity.
All futures are dark now,
Mortarion replied, swiping savagely and backhanding his scythe into the edge of an exposed archway. The keystone smashed to rubble around him.
You have no idea what Horus has become, nor the Emperor. They are both monsters, but you have chosen the wrong one. Horus is a fighter. He is one of us, not some immortal aberration.
The Khan laughed as he pursued him, this time from genuine pleasure. Immortal aberration, he mused, dragging his blade down at a sharp angle and nearly severing a thicket of Mortarion's feeder cables. We all share his blood. What does that make us? More powdered stonework, destroyed by Mortarion's wild scythe blows, bloomed in a cloud around them. Bolt trails whined and punched through the haze before cracking into what remained of the architecture. Uncaring of anything but their own contest, the two Primarchs hacked their way towards the pyramid's core, overshadowed by immense pillars and gaping roof curves, trading blows of such heft that the earth shuddered beneath them.
Just what do you think will happen here?
Spat Mortarion, digging in again and halting his backward course. His armor had been hacked into a tattered parody of its former solidity.
Think you can behead me, like Fulgrim did Ferris?
The Khan missed his aim then for the first time. Was that true? Was Ferris gone? Mortarion surged back at him, kicking the hilt of silence hard into the Khan's leading leg. The ivory greave plate cracked, fizzing with energy as the ceramite fractured. The Khan veered away from the follow-up strike, nearly losing his footing entirely. He staggered backwards as Mortarion went onto the offensive.
Oh yes, he's dead, Mortarion rasped. The numbers are against you already. They will only get worse.
The Khan glanced upwards, up into the immense void of the pyramid's heights. Tiny flecks of glass rained down from the smashed apex, sparkling bloodily from the fires kindling in the fissures below. Prospero's landscape growled its sullen anger, as though the world itself were outraged at a second duel of Primarchs upon its soil. The carbon-dark sky, starless and empty, roiled above the jagged moor of the summit. Mortarion's cloak spread wide, buoyed by hot updrafts from the cobweb of glowing crevasses. For a moment, he looked like some vision of the underworld, a phantom of old Chagoris, consumed by Yaksha, eternal and devilish. The Khan fell back further, holding his dao two-handed. Mortarion was strong as the roots of the Ulav Mountains, but he was slow. The two of them were perfectly matched, like two sides of a medal. If we fought on the same side, he and I, countering our weaknesses, could anything stand before us, he thought. Even Horus. Even the Emperor. He gazed into Mortarion's pallid face and saw the resentment burning there, just as it did in him.
He is lost. We have all been betrayed.
The Death Lord strode closer, sweeping silence low and hard, his expression curdling into hatred, his sclerotic breath low and rapid.
Come then, brother,
said the Khan, bracing for the impact once more, holding position amidst the glass tiers of Magnus's lost city.
Let us decide this, you and I, for eternity.
Mortarion's raw strength was renewed. Facing it full on, the Khan doubted that any of his brothers, save perhaps Ferrus, could have matched it. The Death Lord absorbed every strike that connected, sucking the power out of the blows like a leech, taking the hits and coming back for more. The tenacity of the Death Guard was legendary, as was their ability to absorb punishment and just keep coming. Now, witnessing them in combat for the first time, he appreciated just how true it was. The silent Death Shroud were as implacable as their master, still fighting with the Keshig amidst the wreckage. Warriors of both sides had already fallen, their bodies caked in the drifting dust, but the fighting continued around them, bitter and unyielding. The pyramid's vast interior rose up around the combatants, terrace upon terrace, blotting out what little light remained under its blackened shell. The two Primarchs had torn through what must once have been the antechambers and audience halls, kicking aside fire-crisped books, old instruments, and carbonized artifacts from 1,000 worlds. Now the heart of it loomed before them, a circular floor of obsidian, ivory traced with mystic swirls of silver and clogged with the atrophied cadavers of the long-fallen. Banded columns as wide as rhino transports towered all around, rearing up in the gloom like sentinels. At the very center, inlaid into the dust-streaked floor in gold, was the Eye of Magnus, still glistening faintly, even beneath the filth that caked it. Directly above them, hundreds of meters up, was the apex itself, open to the fury of the skies. As they broke into the circle, the Khan felt himself tiring at last. Never, in uncounted years of combat, had he felt more than trivial stirrings of fatigue. He had fought the greatest champions of Xenos races, had brought down creatures that stood as tall as warhound titans, and carved his way through fields of greenskins as violent and unending as the tides of the sea. And still, he had never felt the bone-deep drag that Mortarion inspired. Only the Primarchs could destroy the Primarchs. Mortarion began to laugh in his coarse way.
Never had it this hard, eh?
He grunted, still wielding silence heavily. He was suffering too. Blood flecked his cheeks and forehead, and his rebreather rattled as he hauled in thick breaths. The Khan launched another attack, flourishing the dowel before searching for a way through Mortarion's stony defense. He was still faster, still more accomplished with the blade, but it was like dueling with entropy itself.
You neither,
the Khan observed, gesturing to the lines of reddened sweat trickling down Mortarion's ash-grey temples.
True enough.
Mortarion's voice gave away his regret. Even amidst the slow burn resentments, the long bitterness, the Death Lord was still sane enough to see the irony of the situation. The Primarchs had been bred to fight as part of one army, each brother making up for the deficiencies of the other. For all the jealousies and rivalries, in terms of raw conquest, that army had been perfect. The Emperor's vision, the great crusade for unity, sweeping across the stars, governed by 20 immortal avatars of his own unmatched psyche, had been impeccable. Now, though, here they were, brawling amidst the embers of Russ's vandalism. The fall was already severe, and they both knew that it would plummet deeper before the end.
You could recant,
the Khan said, falling away from a whistling sweep of the scythe, just as it angled at his helm.
Horus does not own you.
Mortarion snorted.
No, and he never will. You have seen our father's glory unleashed. None of us could stand against him.
Mortarion surged back on the offensive. Around them, The columns flickered and leapt with the reflection of fiery disruptor energies.
He is hobbled by his own mistakes. The throne room is a den of nightmares, one that he cannot leave. The field is open. It is ours to claim.
The Khan beat away a scythe strike and went for Mortarion's gorget. At the last minute, he jutted the blade down, slipped below the defense, and cut a long gash in the Primarch's breastplate. This time, the blade cut deep, paring already fractured armor and delving into the ribcage below. Mortarion grimaced and jerked clear, cracking the Khan's sword away with his scythe shaft and staggering backwards.
"There is nothing to seize,"
growled the Khan, going after him.
"Nothing but the burned earth. Look around you. You will make this the whole galaxy."
Mortarion snarled defiantly and barreled back at him, using the scythe like a halberd and smashing the hilt into the Khan's midriff. The Khan lurched away, stumbling across the uneven floor, and Mortarion lumbered after him. More blows came in, hard, heavy, earth-shaking blows. The Khan was driven further, only barely able to weather the explosion of fury directed at him. When they slammed together again, the impact was bone-jarring. They tore into one another, each strike powered by raw defiance. Fragments of armor flew like shrapnel. Gas exploded from Mortarion's store of vials as the glass was shattered, nearly blinding them both. Blood flew in straggling splatters, trailing across both combatants and staining their armor. As they hacked and countered, neither giving up so much as a centimeter of ground, it mingled upon the blade's edges, as rich and dark as wine. As the Khan fought on, the taste of copper in his mouth and the burn of acid in his muscles, he felt the law of the plains nag at him. He needed space, room to use his speed. He had to break free, to turn the fight into his strengths, to rip clear of Mortarion's cloying grasp. Summoning up one last burst of energy, the Khan bludgeoned away the scythe and pulled away, beckoning his adversary to come after him. The Death Lord held silence high, casting a sickle shadow over the eye device upon the floor. His ripped cloak billowed out in an almost parodic vision of old legends, the Reaper myth of 1,000 human worlds, summoned into life on a world of extinguished souls. The Khan held position, panting hard, trying to drag up energy for the final clash. His heart thudded, his lungs burned. He held the dowel poised, waiting for his enemy to move.
"Come to me. You can see my weakness."
One thrust, one perfect thrust, angled precisely. He had the strength for that. It would have to be flawless. If it were not, no defense remained. Nothing else would suffice for this enemy. No lesser move would accomplish the kill. But Mortarion did not move. He stood, rigid, as though suddenly listening for something. His scythe fell into guard. A thin coughing broke from his mask, which the Khan soon realized was an exhausted kind of chortle.
"So the choice has been made."
The Khan held his ground, unsure what he meant. Mortarion gestured to the death shroud, and they began to pull back towards his position.
"Our ships are at war, brother,"
wheezed Mortarion acidly, limping into retreat.
"This was not what we were promised, but I will not lose a fleet for this fight."
The words blurred from all the blood bubbling in his mouth, spilling out from the edges of his mask.
"Mark it, though. This thing is eternal between us now. You and I, our fates bonded in this place. Remember that. It was here that it started."
The Khan felt the dust stir around his feet. Coils of marsh-green energy rippled down from the pyramid's open apex.
"And when we next do this,"
rasped Mortarion,
"the lines will already be drawn."
He saluted mockingly, and spears of hard-edged light suddenly lanced down from above, bursting through the cloud cover and crashing through the heart of the pyramid carcass. The Khan sprang forward, seeing too late what was happening. The dhow moved quickly, blisteringly fast as he had ever moved it. If it had connected then, it would have stabbed straight through Mortarion's neck, darting over his guard and severing the coils that kept him breathing. But in an instant, the Death Lord and his retinue were snatched away, sucked into the vortex of the warp. The world's wind howled in their empty wake. The ash stirred. The lightning forked. The Khan, carried by his momentum, staggered through the empty space where his enemy had been. He whirled around, wrong-footed, still poised to strike.